moving on, guys, now all we have to do is actually hook this up to a command in our application. So we're going to go over to our solution. We're going to first go over to our main window here. And now we're just going to set the service input and output. So doing this, we're going to call our service, and we're going to tell it to set the input path, and we're going to call our app domain, going to get our current domain, the base directory, and we're simply going to append a input.docx file, which we should have in there. And now we will copy paste, and we're going to do the same but change input over here to output, and our file from input to output here. Now if you're wondering where it's grabbing this file, if we back up here, we go over to our solution, you want to make sure this is in your debug folder. So we're going to right click on our project, and down here at the bottom you should see open folder in File Explorer. We want to do that, and here it'll open everything up. We want to go to bin, debug, and in here is where you should paste the files that were provided in the template project. So with that out of the way, we are now going to have to, let me go over here. We're now going to have to create a command. So we're going to create a public I command, which you may have to add in the using statement for this. We're going to call it generate barcodes, and we'll simply have a get set. Now that we have our command, we want to actually add in our method. So we're going to create a private void, call it generate barcodes, and actually I should go up here to the top. We should use our naming convention of adding command to that. And then we're going to do generate barcodes, string value. This is going to be what we supply in the text box for our initial value for generating. We're then going to have an integer called start value. And by default, we'll set this to 0. So if when we parse it now, if it cannot be parsed, say somebody used plain text rather than actual numerical characters, we'll simply just provide 0. We're then going to call int try parse. We're going to try and parse the value that was passed, and we're going to set that to our start value here. Lastly, we're going to call our service, and we're going to call our generate barcodes to output, and we'll simply pass it the start value. So there's our method, and now we're just going to have our generate barcodes command here to a new relay command, which I provided in the template, and we're going to have it take a string parameter, and we're going to give it our generate barcodes method. So now that we have this, we're going to go over to our main window here, and we're going to go down to our XAML, and we're going to find our start value in our stack panel for generating. First, we want to name our actual text box here, which will be the initial value. We'll call this initial box. We then want to go to our button, and actually before we do all of this, make sure we go to the top here and let's build, because I know we're going to have a problem with XAML. Okay, now that it's rebuilt, we should be able to see our command as we go into our button, and we bind its command to generate barcodes command, and we're going to get its command parameter as well, and we're going to bind this to the element name, which will be the initial box we created, and we'll get the path of text. So we're going to get its text path. Let me break this down a bit. So what we're doing here is we're getting the command we created, and we're passing it the text value of our text box here. So we're going to back up here. We're going to go debug our application. Okay, so now that our application is running, we want to go over here to our start value, and so we know it's generating the right things, we're going to start it off at 600. So the output should be barcodes with 601, 602, 603, etc. And we're going to hit generate to docx. Now mind you, this is something, because we're using the word service, you might want to multi-thread. So we're going to have our application freeze up just for a second. And now it is finished. So we're going to X out of our application. Going to go over here. And again, we're going to go to our open folder and file explorer. Alright guys, so now before we get into the view model, let me first explain exactly what we're doing with these Word documents. In the template project, you should have been provided with a input and output docx file. This is the input docx. Now, basically what I did is I just created